We're going to be talking about today being dads in the modern world, kind of taking a traditionalist approach. You have a little one yourself, right?
Yeah. Almost 1 year old now.
Okay, yeah, mine's 1.5 right now, so pretty close in age. Well, first of all, I do want to say I'm honored to have you on the channel. Your show, Dormant Dynasty and previously Asian Capitalist, was a big inspiration to me. I went down a very similar path that you did. Ideologically, I mean, I didn't go through the same events you did, but I had very similar. I started out libertarian. I was all for the non-aggression principle, the free markets, the whole legalize everything, just libertarianism. As I wasn't ANCAP, but I was pretty dang close, though. But anyway, so it's really cool to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I find that this path that a lot of us go on is not too uncommon. Everybody who's a former libertarian has gone down, Papa, and then maybe Moldbug, or maybe gone back to religion, and here we all are now in kind of post-libertarianism. Do you want to talk about fatherhood first, and then jump into politics later, or?
Yeah, for sure. Let's do that. Let's jump into fatherhood first. How about a little bit of just your experience? I know your daughter's only one.
Yeah.
From what I've noticed, my son's 1.5 years old. There's already a lot of stuff that I feel like I'm keeping away from my son. I would say, like, there's a lot of bad that I see parents around me that are giving their kids that I'm trying to stay away from, and I'm just a little bit out of the group.
I do think about it quite often, especially, I mean, she's only one right now, but when she starts to learn how to talk, then it's pop music. I want to keep her away from pop music.
Yeah.
When she starts watching movies, I want to keep her away from some of the more subversive stuff.
Go-to would be like PBS. But like watching the stuff, even like the Sesame Street and just everything on there, they're pushing a lot of, neoliberal things on the kids, and I've kind of gone away, and I've started having my son watching a lot of YouTube. I mean, I have him watch. His favorite thing to watch right now is Let's Play of Yoshi's Island.
Okay.
Yeah. So he likes that.
Yeah, there's nothing subversive in that, hopefully, right?
No. Miyamoto does good work. So that's fine. I've struggled finding things for him to watch, because a lot of it is that way. We were watching Sesame Street, and they were doing a lesson on how there's no such thing as boy toys and there's no such thing as girl toys. And all right, so okay, I see where this is going. And then they had the Elmo episode where he came out trying to explain to kids the Black Lives Matter.
Oh, wow.
And I was just, all right, well, let's turn back on Yoshi's. let's see what the Yoshis are up to.
Yeah.
But it's a struggle. We see it everywhere, and I think that it's interesting that the deconstruct of the traditional genders as it can be seen in the market itself. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah. What's funny is that when I was growing up, I think that the powers that be were kind of pushing an opposite agenda. They were hypersexualizing us and kind of separating us into kind of very, very specifically defining what makes a boy cool and what makes a girl cool. I remember in about the 5th grade or so, all the girls were really into Mariah Carey, and it's like if you hadn't heard of Mariah Carey, they would laugh you out of the room. I got laughed out of the room at the time. That's how So I mean, a lot of the trends were very, very targeted. The girls have to like this, the boys have to like this, and ultimately it also came down to sexualization. Exposing us to kind of hypersexuality early. Boys, at a certain age, would become fairly obsessed with sexuality. But American Pie, I think, really kind of piled onto that and really did something to kind of the psyche of my generation. The whole thing about American Pie is like, if you don't get laid before you graduate high school, then you're a loser. Yeah, I noticed, especially in high school, a lot of the guys would say, we would talk about girls, and the guys would say certain girls don't put out, and so don't waste your time, that kind of thing. So a lot of this stuff kind of I think had a very negative effect on a lot of us and led us to make some pretty bad decisions.
What a bad lesson on us as our young minds there. It's interesting to think though, as you were saying, it was different back then than it is now. What led us to where we are now? Where's this pushing one side or the other of the genders to now being a spectrum? It's an interesting move.
Yeah. Well, the way I like to call it, the kind of the revolutionary mindset, right? It's the revolutionary is always looking for the next revolution. There's a lot of psychological reasons that maybe I shouldn't too much armchair psychologist about, but the revolutionary is constantly looking for the next revolution. Every time a revolutionary finds kind of the cutting edge of the revolution, then they become the high status individual, right? They become the intellectual, the vanguard. So by the time early life sexualization was kind of a blown over fad, they went on to the next thing, right? And the next thing was, what about gender as a spectrum? What about transgenderism? That could be the next revolution of our time.
That makes sense. It's just whatever. How far left can we go? Let's just keep revolutionizing. It's become more and more so. So it's like that cycle you're saying, where it just whoever can get to the most fringe of the revolutionary becomes kind of the head of it.
I mean, if you look at the hippie movement back then, it was the transgressive thing was drugs, and it was sex. There was sex and drugs, right? But then you keep going along that line, and it's like the next revolution and the next revolution, and here we are now. Now that I've been through it, being a teenager here in Canada, my mindset is always, how am I going to keep my daughter away from this stuff?
Right. Oh my gosh, I'm 100% with you. It's tough, and it's tough when their friends are into it. And it's not because you can't, of course, obviously you can't parent the other kids, but your kids need friends and they need to be around other ones, and it's going to be a bad influence on them. I see it a little bit now. I do know some kids that are around Mikey's age that are that their parents are going the very modern route, and it makes me nervous, even at that little age that my son's at, to see that starting up.
Maybe a white pill.
Okay, I'll take those.
I have a cousin who's 16 now, and she's like the most goody two shoes I've ever met, And how it happened was that she got into anime. She got into anime early. Before her anime phase, she was actually starting to like Ariana Grande. So luckily, very luckily,
very luckily, yep.
Yeah, she found anime, and ever since that point, she's kind of I don't know what the anime archetype that describes her is, but she's like the kind of nerd girl. She's like that's interesting to think of. So different kinds of entertainment to provide your kids. Now, I never really watched much anime in my teenage years. I really liked Cowboy Bebop a lot, but outside of that, would you say that's a good form of entertainment for your kids to watch? Because you got like Pokemon early on. You got younger shows. Yeah, anime is better, I think. I mean, I'm sure there are still some animes with some inappropriate things for kids, but yeah. And actually, speaking from my own experience, I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, and from Dragon Ball Z, I actually learned a lot about warrior spirit and masculinity, heroic archetypes, that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of positive you can take out of, especially the classical animes.
No, I don't know much about Dragon Ball Z. So I do know like it's the show about the group that they're looking for a certain amount of Dragon Balls, and they can get a wish granted once they find them all, something like that. Please feel free to correct me. If you could give me a little bit of a brief idea of where you got masculinity from there.
So Dragon Ball Z, initially it was just about the kind of questing for the Dragon Balls, but eventually it developed into a show about basically a race of aliens, or human-like aliens, landing on Earth, and then a bunch of other aliens, usually aliens, but sometimes androids or things from the future, challenging those guys to a fight and threatening to blow up the Earth, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, through that, I think what Dragon Ball does the best is characters. The characters are always very, very memorable. They all have kind of the unique personalities. They all kind of represent kind of a heroic or masculine archetype, really. So the main character is kind of lighthearted, playful. He doesn't take things. He's the best fighter in the universe, but at the same time, he has this lighthearted side, free-spirited, and doesn't take things very seriously. Whereas his main rival, who also eventually joins the good guys, he's this kind of very serious, uptight. He was a former prince from a different planet, so he kind of takes great pride in conducting himself in a noble and princely fashion. So they kind of have this contrast between the two main protagonists.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So on to the next part of. What's your thoughts on? Because this is going to be different for us, the United States and Canada, but the public schools and alternatives to that. Because I'm sure Trudeau has a wonderful education system for the kids.
We can't really blame it all on this Trudeau. Maybe the Trudeau Senior, but
yeah.
But yeah, okay. First grade was when we first got sex ed, and this was in the 90s.
In first grade.
First grade, they brought out the diagrams of the naked people, naked man and woman, and this is a penis, this is a vagina. So I don't know how bad it's gotten now, but even in the 90s, it was pretty bad in Canada. So.
Oh my gosh, that is
stunning and brave.
Wow. Well, so what's your plan for your daughter then? I mean, are you planning on sending her to the public schools, or are you?
So yeah. Luckily, there's still a few years to think about it, and hopefully, maybe there'll be more options in 5 years. But if it comes down to it, homeschooling is an option. Right?
That's good.
Yeah. Here's the thing about being a parent that I found though is that I thought that I would have more work-life balance, and it hasn't really panned out that way. So if I'm going to be homeschooling, I've only put out 3 videos this year or 2 videos this year. In a few years, I'm not going to be able to put out any videos. I don't know how I'm going to find the time for that.
Right. No, I completely, I get that. I've noticed after having my son, especially now that he's walking and, doing things and causing trouble everywhere, I don't have time to, to do anything. I spend 1 hour of my night and I play some 64 games or something, and that's just, my me time. But outside of that, it's straight to work and then, straight home to kids, and, and I love it. I wouldn't change that for anything, but it definitely does. It definitely takes up your time. Yeah. We're planning on doing that ourselves as homeschooling. And I saw there's a lot of different ways, like there's classical homeschooling, and I think that's what we're looking at. Taking our son out to nature a lot. I think there's a lot more to learn than just academia that I guess we learn in schools. Yeah. That I'm real happy to teach on.
Yeah.
That actually kind of brings me into my next thing I want to talk about, a little bit of that, getting your kids out into nature, out into the natural world. As a kid, growing up in rural areas, I was kind of a little bit of a dorky kid. I loved video games. I was playing inside, and I unfortunately, I didn't really get the experience of nature as a lot of other kids did. And now as an adult, I can kind of appreciate it more. Going to parks and being outside in the natural world. So we've been taking my son out on walks out in just the local, just forest areas, and the things you see out there. It's not just the trees and the smells, but we actually seen a frog jumping out in front of us on the path, and we seen a snake chasing slithering fast after it.
Yeah.
I pointed to it. My son does understand, he's 1.5. He was, and I'm pointing. I was, Mikey, look. I mean, this is nature happening in front of us. This is the natural world happening in front of us. You have, the might is right. The strong is, chasing the weak. But it definitely it's there's a lot you can get out of it. I would say more than just being outside.
Interestingly, in Hong Kong, the laws on homeschooling are quite strict. What I do know is that there's only about 100 kids who are homeschooled in the entire city of 7 million. But interestingly enough, they have their own little social network, and so they go on field trips together.
No, that's a great answer to, because what's the big problem with homeschooling that everybody says? The lack of socialization, or the socializing with other children, and that's something that I'm concerned with myself with doing that. But that's a great alternative, creating a network with other homeschooling parents.
As a side benefit, it's a great way to meet fellow right-wingers, if you think about it. Because who homeschools? It's right-wingers.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. For sure. Yeah.
The one thing I'll be promoting today is homeschooling your kids and forming local networks with other homeschool parents.
And it's great to be able to find that community too of the right wing, because of course we have the cathedral is against the way that we think, on the right. I love the Evola quote that everybody before the French Revolution thought like I did.
Yeah, we're the radical traditionalists. But really, who's the radical? Everybody before 250 years ago thought like we did. You're the radical.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you think of how long, people have been around, relatively speaking, this is definitely a short period of time that we've thought like this. And I don't think that it was like right away that people started having this existential view on the world. Right when the French Revolution, it was a slow creeping process. And so I think that it's actually more recent than we would think. I think that the 60s and the hippie era is really what solidified it.
Yeah. So, the first question we really have to ask ourselves is, do we want to transcend upwards or do we want to transcend downwards?
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely don't want to go down. We've definitely gone down far enough.
Yeah. So, by no means am I looking to, or am I advocating for a dictator to come in and say, you have to do this, you have to do that. But I'm saying that we need to ask that first question, upward transcendence or downward transcendence. And from there, that's how we build on our philosophy.
How would you describe, I guess briefly, the upward transcendence, and what would be the downward transcendence? Because, of course, upward, it would be that, connecting with, being closer to God, connecting to the divine. What is that downward? Would you describe that degeneracy, or?
Yes. Well, yeah. In one word, degeneracy. But and this is what you and I we've been sending links back and forth. We're kind of in our own little reading group,
yeah.
And this is one of the themes that I eventually want to address with you on another video. But I think it really begins. You could. The Christian conception of it is quite accurate, actually. It's either you choose the Garden of Eden, or you reject God and you eat the fruit from the forbidden tree of knowledge, right? Lucifer promises, if you reject God, you can become gods yourself. So I think it all follows from that. Downward transcendence is the logical conclusion of downward transcendence, of rejecting God, is apotheosis. It's to become gods ourselves. And maybe not the majority of the human population may think that way. A lot of them are just thinking, I just want to pay less taxes and I want to live free in the woods or something. But if humans are distributed along various Pareto distributions, along various bell curves, and on the kind of extreme end of ambition, you're going to get that group of elites who, these are the most ambitious and sometimes intelligent or creative, well-connected people in the world, manipulative people in the world too. And these people are going to tend towards this Luciferian idea, and that's where you get the current crop of elites from. That's where you get these satanic, they are satanic. If you really look into a lot of the symbolism that they use, a lot of the ideas that they push. And, why are they always hanging around people like Aleister Crowley and Marina Abramovich? Either they're LARPing as Satanists or they actually are Satanists, right? Yeah. And that's why you have them pushing all of these things like transhumanism, gene editing, the panopticon, surveillance state. I mean, these people want to be all-knowing via 5G and the panopticon, the surveillance state, and they want to become immortal via transhumanism and gene editing. So they want to become gods themselves.
Yep, that just real quick note on that transhumanism. That is the I think that's where the left's headed next. That's going to be the next big left social battle, and that one makes me nervous. That's the one that I'm the most concerned about, I would say. You know,
if you look at transgenderism, it's heading. Transgenderism is already body alteration. You normalize that. The next step is, do you want to be a dolphin or do you want to be a Sagittarius? You get the next surgery, right?
Yeah, and it's this whole, it's in kind of like what you're saying, we'll be gods. We're playing God now. Yes, we're the ones who are deciding what we are ourselves instead of accepting our own identity. And you know what, I've said that too, that I think that Lucifer was the original progressive.
Yeah, the first
yeah.
I think even Saul Alinsky said that Satan was the first revolutionary in a glowing, in a way of praising Satan.
Oh wow! Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's not really okay. That's wow.
Yeah. If you look at it, by rejecting God, you're saying that God is not the supreme moral authority, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's where everything follows from. If you reject that initial premise that God is the creator and supreme moral authority, then you go down the path of Luciferianism. Another thing that I've been pretty worried about, and this will get into kind of like the current events type of stuff, but the Great Reset, World Economic Forum, Bill Gates' mandatory vaccination, immunity passports. It's like, this is the world that we brought our kids into. It's like I kind of feel bad almost.
For sure. It seems like it's every generation you bring your kids into a rougher spot, and you, even thinking too of what are our kids going to be, our grandkids be brought into. If you think like, the people from generations ago, if they were to see us how we are now, it would be kind of embarrassing how it turned out.
Maybe since we're nearing the end, I should promote a project that I'm working on.
Yes, please do.
I think there's so much energy that's being wasted nowadays in political discourse, about false dialectics, or electoral politics and all of that, because people are watching different movies on the same screen, right? There's too many competing worldviews going on right now. It's very hard to come to find people who have the same kind of ontology as you do, categorize things the same way that you do. One thing that I am putting together right now is a website. It'll be up pretty soon. It's called IronAgeArchive.com. What I'm hoping to do is to get everybody on the same page. So if a conservative doesn't know what a neo-reactionary is talking about, and if an atheist neo-reactionary like Moldbug doesn't know what a traditionalist like Ganon or Evel are talking about, I think this website is going to be kind of it's going to pull videos from YouTube, right? From these various reactionary perspectives. And hopefully by browsing through this website, it's going to be updated, pretty much as soon as the YouTube videos go up. And by browsing through, and you can browse through via category or by when it's uploaded. And hopefully this will help everybody, at least on the right wing, kind of know what the other camps in the right wing are talking about when we say various things like the cathedral or traditionalism, degeneracy, and all that. Because it's very hard to kind of form a political movement when we all have different definitions and we don't know what the other person's definitions are.
Yep.
And I think this is a big part of breaking out of the false dialectic as well. It's that we need to have common language again. And what's happened is that we don't have common language to the point where we can't even agree what socialism means, because that wasn't real socialism. We can't agree what real capitalism was, because that wasn't real capitalism.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you say, because I feel like this would be more helpful on your website would be more helpful on the right, because I would say that our ideas are a little bit more diverse. So that we do have the different worldviews. There's a lot going on the right, whereas the left feels a little bit more unified. Like there's a specific, like a bureaucratic way of how you form your opinion on the left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they have the cathedral, right? And when there's a cathedral, everybody kind of conforms to. There's kind of a natural mechanism where initially I'm sure there are plenty of leftists who disagreed with whole transgenderism thing, but there is a natural mechanism that happens to the point where inevitably they have to come to consensus, because otherwise you get kicked out of the church.
You will, and I think a great example of that is like the I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but the writer of the Harry Potter books. She was kicked out of the church. She did not toe the line. She didn't go along with everybody else.
So for the viewers, Mike and I are currently reading about generative anthropology, which is a very obscure branch of I don't even know if it's philosophy, but anthropology certainly, a very obscure branch of right-wing thought that doesn't get talked about enough, and has some very interesting ideas, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So from what I've read so far, it's some interesting stuff in there. If you wouldn't mind, give a brief, kind of just a summary of what's to come.
Okay, yeah. Well, generative anthropology, there are various professors in the field, but you and I are reading Adam Katz, and Adam Katz has proposed this idea that the idea of sovereignty, every time sovereignty is mixed into or is kind of diluted, for example, if the president represents the will of the people, or if even if the king represents the will of God, this is in a way kind of imperium in imperio, in the sense that, if you can represent the people, why can't Joe Biden also represent the people? Why can't Nancy Pelosi represent the will of the people? Or if you represent the will of God, why can't this guy represent the will of God? So in that sense, you're always going to leave that door open for a revolution. So Adam Katz puts forward that sovereignty needs to be an end in itself. So it's not about representing the will of the people or the will of God even. It's about sovereignty for the sake of sovereignty, because sovereignty is the center of society. And there's a lot of interesting ideas that come out of that. Yeah. And it actually comes out of generative anthropology itself, which is a theory of how language and society first form, in something called the originary event, which I don't know if we should get into that right now.
Yeah, maybe we can hold off till next time. So a little bit of a sneak peek of what's to come. So I'm real excited about it, and I think that's going to be a good discussion. So coming up later on, if you follow Dormant Dynasty, I highly recommend it. Definitely one of my favorite channels on YouTube. Give them a subscribe and follow along.
I got to give a shout out actually too, because I recorded something with another friend, a local friend, in the summer, and I still haven't put the video out yet. So shout out to Nathan Smith and the Dust of Nations project, and we did a film review of 1BR. So if anybody wants to check out an interesting movie about cults, check out 1BR and stay tuned for the Nathan Smith video that we have coming up.
Sounds good. I'll make sure and link that video itself too in the description.
Yeah. Nathan Smith does great film analysis. Actually, he did a analysis of the Lego Movie and the Luciferian themes in it. So I highly recommend checking out his channel as well. That's a good place to end it. Yeah.
All right.